and English and maybe a couple other languages, different approaches to making those keys, revisions upon revisions,
right.
Name changes that don't show up. And, you know, just this is the general taxonomy problem. The good thing about Discover Life Guides is if someone is keeping them up, everyone's working from the latest information, right? Because you present that. So if you publish a key in a few months, it'll be out of date because someone will say, well, you know, we found another species, or this is a split, or there's an addition or a name change. And so now you still have to start tracking those changes to use any key correctly. Theoretically, you're still at the whim of whoever the person is who is creating and working on the Discover Life Guides. But if it was a group effort, then they can be, you know, to the minute up on taxonomy or changes, or at least put warnings out for people.
Yeah. No,
So
there are advantages, and
yeah.
matrix keys in general, I think, are very helpful. Right,
and you can make, and you know how, particularly if it's a complicated guide, you make it, and then someone says, you know, this species is, you know, incorrect, or there's like, I don't get your wording on that couplet. Like I always get to that couplet, and then it's a nightmare. I can't figure it out, or I take the wrong end, or you just get these complaints, and well, it's too late. It's published, and you could do your own version and send it out again, or someone else can. But again, with Discover Life, I'll show you in this guide, you can just go in and redo the character and add more wording, which is something that I always emphasize to people. Don't make it parsimonious, right? Don't use the fewest words possible. Use the most words possible. You want explanations for what do you mean when you talk about cetos or whatever, and things like that. So more information is better. These really trimmed down guide, like nature doesn't do that. It's complicated. So if you want, I can go right into Elijah's guide, and we can kind of walk that back. I sent out, I think, to everybody probably the key. It's really simple. Should I share? Can I go ahead and share, Neil?
Oh yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen, and we'll just see if what shows up when I do this in terms of jumping around on my computer. I want to go to Firefox. Okay. All right. So you should see, let me know if you don't, a blank guide for, gosh, Elijah's not here, so I'm not going to pronounce this, Divivarnis. I'm going to call it that. A genus, Scalenionid parasitic wasp, his bag. And now, can you see, when I click to this, do you see that? See the guide itself? Yeah. This is the published guide. Okay, all right, so that's working. I was just concerned that if I flip to a new tab that I'd have to change the share features. Okay, so this is really simple. It's 3 species, and you can see here, it's actually very well done. Like there's no particular need for a 3 species guide if that was your sole thing, because this is well done, and you have lots and lots of photographs. It's really a beautiful key as is. And nicely within the key, there are multiple characters that are splitting among each of the steps. So if we look, usually if you're taking an existing key and you want to devolve it into Discover Life, or any other matrix one like Lucid, what you do is you start at the rear end and work your way forward. So here, if we look at this last couplet here, you have 3 characters that help separate these 2 species. And a lot of times in a lot of keys, it's just 1 character. And if you get into complicated keys, you're looking at areas where you're splitting entire groups by 1 character. But what if you can't see that character, right? So that's the beauty of these matrix guides. There's multiple avenues to the correct answer. This is very simplified, but it's what you want to think about when you're developing a guide is not the least number of steps, but the most number of steps. You want to include as many characters that would help separate out the species that are unambiguous or can be made unambiguous. And I'll talk about that maybe later. Because sometimes, you know, gluing or presentation or parts missing, things like that, or just the fact that you're not 100% sure about one character, you can use another character as validation. So the more redundancy, the better. So this is nice to work with in this particular case. So I've created a blank guide here. Thank you, Pick, for setting this up. I've added 2 species already, and you don't see anything else because I haven't done what we call scoring of the species, and this will become clearer right now. But I'll just show you, I'm going to add a new species, the 3rd one here, and so we're going to go to click on the, let me back up in terms of these guides. So you, as long as you have the password, maybe I should talk about that. In order to work on this guide, you have to have a password. And the password is continuously changing. So you request it by, when I click this menu, I get a stripped down version of this. This is the full, all the features you need to change the guide. But you get a stripped down version where you can get the pin. Okay, so the pin is the key for working on the guide, and it'll last for a few days and then disappear, which is kind of what you want. So that pin gets sent to your email. If your email is registered as an official user of the guide, and then you pull it out and add it to the URL string up at the top. And you can see this is the pin. It says, I can't see this super well on my screen. Oh, the upper screen. The and sign pin equals, and then you have a 4-digit code. Very simple, but very safe because there's no permanent password thing going on here. So that's what I've done. I pasted it up here. Now, when I click menu, I get the full set of features that allow me to make any change I want in the guide from the ground up. So, okay, now back. So I can hit reset, get rid of all the dots here. I'm going to add a new species. So I just click score and I click submit. And I get this box and we'll add the missing, oops, I don't want to do that. I want to go over to here and I want to do, oops, this is the one that's not known. Copy that name, electrolithron, and I'm going to go to the guide. I'm going to add the scientific name. Okay, notice that the creation of the guide, that when they created it, they put in the, as a path, the phylogenetic, I guess I would call it, current pathway or whatever is the appropriate one for the taxonomic level that the guide is going to be addressing. So here, Scalenianity and on back, and that I think there's higher order. I'm not sure how this rolls into DiscoverLife. Like, I think there's a reason to have this entire path in there because there's some interaction at higher levels. But now that I think of it, I don't know why it's useful, but it seems appropriate, doesn't it? It may show up actually in the species with these species names that it puts it in the proper places. Okay, and now I'm going to put in the authority, which I go back to here and is Elijah and Nico and oops, put it back into there. And I'm going to say, pretty sure it's 2016. I could put in sex because there's only females, but I'm not including any males, so I'm just leaving it blank. You can do things like put in a morph, like let's say there's a red morph and a black morph. You could address them as separate units, like you could have a red morph, a black morph. You could have a queen or worker. You can put those in there. You can add synonyms directly right here. if they don't already exist in the structure of the guides, mostly except for bees, they don't. John Asher, we address his synonym list directly for the bees, but here you can put in your synonyms and common names right up front. You can also put in links in this section if you wanted to species pages for that, which I don't have any. They may exist, I don't have them. And I'm not going to do this yet, but I have a couple of characters already set in place. I could score them, and by scoring them, I would click on the character that this species has that's associated with these. I don't have to, like if I don't have a specimen and I'm not sure about the second one, I can just leave that blank. And when anyone uses that character later, the species, in this case, electrolithron would stay in the guide because no information. So I'm not going to score this now because we're going to come back and score these later. But when you're adding a new species, you get presented all of the characters in the guide, and you can score them at that time, or you can score them later. And if you think you misscored them or you want to broaden the scores, you can change it immediately. So I hit the refresh character. So let me mention, basically what you're doing is submitting code. It's XML code for anyone who cares. And the guides are built through these screens, but when you submit something, and I went through it very quickly there, passed over a little subset, you can actually see the XML code. And then that code sits in a folder somewhere on DiscoverLife and isn't implemented until you hit the refresh key. The refresh key takes the code or sets of code and builds it back into the guide. Additionally, this guide, as you're seeing it right now, a person coming in from outside would not see this version. They would see yesterday's version because you're in a workspace, and then in the middle of the night, although it brings up the point is like, if you work in the middle of the night, when does that happen? But sometime in the middle of the night, it takes the work that's done in the workspace and pushes it over to the public side, so the public will see it. And that's useful, right? Because you're making a lot of changes. You don't want someone who's using your guide to be like, what's going on? You know, these names are jumping all over the place, or whatever else you've messed up. I should also point out that if you do mess up, you have a section here that called undo. And if we're going to click on it, these are all the versions. So each of these versions is a separate time something in the guide was refreshed. And you can go back to any of the previous versions, which again, it's just a bunch of code, right? So that's nice because sometimes you make some disastrous change and delete things that shouldn't be deleted, or something just is bad. You can go back to these earlier versions which are saved. So we're moving out of that now. And so now, but we added that species, but you don't see it over here. In order to see it over here, we have to hit menu again. There it is. And also there's a feature up here called checklist, and it has your full taxonomic checklist of the species in your guide written there too. So they usually don't use the checklist, but it shows the complete listing for the species involved. So now I have the 3 species that I'm interested in are in, and now it's time to think about the guide itself. So you have to have characters and states of those characters. And I've entered 2 things, 2 characters in here, and I'm going to enter a third. I'm not going to enter every possible one that you could de-articulate from Elijah's guide, but I'm going to enter, this is just an example. It's just a toy. I'm not sure anyone would ever use it, but just to give you an example. So let's see if I go to, I like to work out my characters and states in WordPad because it's very simple, doesn't add any weird diacritical, strange, character aspects that Word might put in, like a long dash versus a hyphen, stuff like that. So WordPad is super stripped down. So I like working there because when you enter, you'll see when you enter the character and states, you only have a small data entry box. So it's hard to format as you type. And formatting is really important. So let's go back to Elijah's guide here, and we're going to work, I'm going to show you my modification. So you can do what you want, but I'm telling you based on experience, this is how I would look at changing the wording of this guide to a Discover Life guide so that as many people as possible can use it who aren't in the club, right? Let's say I wanted to key out one of these wasps instead of bees. Well, there's several things in here that are very specific to this wasp group, some of which you need to know because it is a feature that doesn't occur on bees, and others of it, falls into the sort of category of jargon. And so I'd like to strip things back to a very basic level in terms of presenting information about the characters that that requires as little specialized understanding as possible, but still is going to get you to the right answer, which is the goal. So if we look at this one, so for example, separating one of the characters that he's using to separate these two species is this sulcus and metanodal trough foveate and versus sulcus and metanodal trough present as an elongate furrow. Okay, so I won't show you the pictures. He has good pictures of it, but basically you've got your trough is really composed of a series of circular holes, and you have the trough as one long ditch, really. Pretty easy to tell apart. The way I write the characters is like this, and let's see if I can get you to my WordPad document and you see if you see it. Do you see that WordPad document or not? Are you seeing? No. Okay, let me see if I can share the WordPad document because I think I'm only, can share one application at a time maybe. All right, let's see.
I think if you unshare and then when you share again,
okay,
you go to the generic share everything. It's usually in the upper right-hand corner.
Okay. All right.
What you can also do is that you basically share your entire screen and then you can actually exchange windows.
Yeah.
Oh, flip around. Okay. All right. I'll try that the next time. That's good. I didn't know I could do that. But can you see the WordPad document now?
Yes.
Okay. So what I usually do is I take whatever wording I have from wherever that's a character separation, dump it into WordPad, and then I de-articulate it into the format that we use, but you don't have to use. I'm just showing you what is my opinion really at this point because everyone writes guides a little bit different. But in this case, what we were talking about is this metanodal characteristic. So here I'm going to highlight this. Can I highlight it? Yeah, I can. Let me bump that up to there. Okay, so you see in the blue box, this is how I would approach that character. So I'm not, I'll talk about this a little bit later, but because these are really clear characters, I am not combining them. I think that's poor form. It confuses people because you're trying to hold several concepts at a time. So rather than to have a character that has the three, what are essentially three characters at once, like has this and this and this, that's a poor character, I think. I'm just breaking them down into one character at a time. He has three, he's using three. I'm presenting them as, and you'll see that how I'm doing this, as one character each and three separate characters. So this one character that has to do with the metanotum, this is how I present. So here, this upper part is going to be the character, and when we talk about characters, I spend a lot of time on wording, particularly when I'm working with someone else. So we have a format that I think works well, is in the guide. And this, you would say, well, it doesn't make that much sense, but it does start making sense when you have really big guides. And the reason is we start with large body part and move to small body part as the first part of the character always. And what that does is there are places in Discover Life where everything is just alphabetical. Like you can go to a list of all the characters and find the character you're most interested in and jump to it. It's alphabetical. So this makes it easy to find because, like, oh, I'm looking for the metanodal character, it'd be under thorax, right? So, and I know different people use different terminologies, is that a thorax or is that something else? But this is what I'm using. You can do your own guide. So here we go, thorax, metanotum, metanodal trough, shape of depressions forming sulcus is the character. And then the states of that character are really simple. So you want everything that pertains to the two states up here in the character. So I can very quickly, because I'm using a similar format, this is telegraphic style. I know what to expect every single time, and I'm going to read that, and I very quickly get an idea. Oh yeah, that's the sulcus character on the thorax. So, and then the states would be, and Elijah may completely disagree with me in this presentation, but the main feature would be round and narrow furrow. So, and notice that and this seems trivial, but it really helps. So here I've got it capitalized. So I capitalize things that are the sort of the key summation of the differences. So again, when you're using these keys a lot, as a lot of people are, particularly the complex guides, rather than have to read things over and over, you got it. That's the round one, click, rather than reading it and then going, oh yeah, that's the round one. These are quick features as a user that really start making a difference. But as a person writing it, it's like, it doesn't seem that important. But here, capitalize round versus narrow furrow. That's the key separation parts. The rest of it is explanation for what do I mean by round and narrow furrow, right? You might stop at round and narrow furrow, or you could use the term like foveolate, but better is to use more colloquial but equally understood terms. So here I would say, and now I can explain it, what I mean by round. It's not round, but it's present as a series of rounds, sometimes overlapping roughly circular depressions, and then entire region occupied by one long, narrow furrow. You can change it to whatever you want. But again, I'm also indoctrinating you into how we do things. So now let me go try, I'm going to stop share and try to share the entire screen so I can flip back and forth here. So stop sharing and share screen. Show all windows. Would that be it, do you think, Silas? I'm going to try it.
Yeah, that should be it.
Okay. All right. So now do you see the WordPad document?
Yes.
Still? Okay. All right. Now I'm going to copy this as the character, and I'm going to flip to the key. Do you see the key now?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah,
okay, good.
Well.
All right. Well, thanks. That's a new Zoomy thing for me, and very useful. All right. So now I want to create this new character. So I'm going to go back to score, and I'm going to do all states and images and click that. And you can see I have a couple other characters already here, but because none of these things are scored, it doesn't show up anywhere in the guide yet. But I'm going to go, and I could go down here to new characters, or I can use these jumps, which once you start getting into big guides, those jumps become really, really useful. So I just dump the character in there. You can see why I don't try and compose in those boxes. And I'm going back and I'm grabbing the first one and putting it in here and putting in the second one. I should note that sometimes you're dealing with a a sequence of states of a character that are, say, numeric, or that you want to present in a certain order, it's going to just do alphabetical order on the screen unless you do something. So you can do things like this. If you want this to present second, you could do two like that, and or a hyphen. Oops. Type correctly. Why am I? Oh, there we go. Okay. Now, if I put them in that way, this is going to be first. This is going to be second in the states. Not that big of a deal here, but sometimes you might have 6, 7, 8, 9 states, and depending on what you're working with. And so you can put that as A and B, lots of different ways to do it to force it to be in a certain order. We don't really care here. I'm just giving you options for really big guides. Okay, so I've got that. All I do is hit any of these save buttons. Here's our XML code. It doesn't make any difference to anybody, but if you see something weird up here, other than thanks, save changes on server, like a warning, then some problem has come up and something is corrupted, and you may need to redo it, or you may have to go to an undo, or sometimes it's that you didn't click on the right thing, and it's sometimes it'll say did nothing, you need to click on something, you know, that kind of thing. It gives you a little bit of feedback to the ways that you mess up. But this looks good. You can see the guide in XML kind of format here. And now, though, use refresh. So we're going to make it active and do that.
Oh, yeah. Sam? So I'm assuming you can work on an ID guide collaboratively, and each person's contribution will show up in the previous window that you showed. Is that true?
Now, okay. So give me a for instance on a collaboration.
Well, like what we want to do for the Bees of the San Francisco Peaks is divide a guide, and we might split it up by family or genus.
Yep.
And we could potentially even, work on one genus together, 2 or 3 people. So that would be an example.
Yep. Yeah. So you can do that. The only real issue, because this can be done on any computer, right? As long as you have got that PIN number. The only issue would be not doing it at the same time so you don't run over each other. See what I'm saying?
Yep.
Yeah. Otherwise, no problem at all. And we do that regularly.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Okay, so I added another character there. I should also point out that once you create a species, you also create a species page. So if was this the one I was looking at? So I took one. So I did this species, and I actually took from Elijah's document. And this is what we try to do with, and this is just an ongoing activity. Try and grab whatever literature is out there and going into it that has some kind of description of the species and copying that in as an extract and pasting it into the species page for the species. So this is just a little thing that I did. You can link to other people's information and that would show up. You can also add pictures. So if I had pictures for this species, once you get involved with DiscoverLife, you are given a album. And I believe I have the presentation thing is showing up in getting in my way here. How do I get to, let's see if I get, when I go up there, I want to click on it, but it's hidden. Can I move this thing? Oh, I can. Okay.
Yeah, you can move anything.
Got it. All right. So here's my album. So these are my album of pictures. I can put whatever pictures I want up there. And the format is really simple. The name of the album is the scientific name of the species involved, comma, and then whatever else you want to put in there doesn't matter. And so once you have done that, this species, Herasium venosum, is going to show up on the Herasium venosum page. So same thing if we were working on the wasps, which I didn't try to do, I could upload to my album. If I simply name them, they will show up on the species page. I can control what shows up on the species page. So I'm editing that this picture record. You can, first of all, I can change the name however I want. I can add in attributions and a whole bunch of other things that I almost never do. Here I can modify how this picture shows up. When it goes in, it doesn't show up at all, right? You're just entering pictures to your album. You then change it to one of these codes that shows where it shows on the species page. It can say like, this gets pushed to the top. Like this is my favorite picture, I don't know, or most important. And you can order them at any level you want, or you can not, basically them as something that's not going to show. So you have a way of showing what shows up in the pictures. If you go to the bee guides, you'll see that a lot of those guides have tons and tons of pictures now that are useful references. I think of them as the replacement for museums, but not really. It's just a virtual museum for people to compare their identifications to. But you can have whatever pictures you want. And I can also have pictures in here that are illustrative of a character, and I'll show you how to add that in a bit. But we're going back to the guide. So I've clicked on the other species here, do not have anything in them. This code is something that is got a problem with a new server issue, but I think it would be a place where it would have pulled in some of these synonyms. Not important right now, but something PIC is working on. Okay, so I have species entered. I've entered in a bunch of characters. I can add in as many characters as I want or eliminate them and rename them. So if I want to rename them, I just click on rename if. I pull that up, and let's say this character should be Keels instead of Keel. Very easy. Just copy it, paste it over here, add an S, and hit save, and then hit refresh to make it active. And now if I go back in again, you can see it's Keels. So you can do that with any of these characters. You can add additional characters, all that kind of stuff. So now though, let's score in this very simple guide. I've simplified a lot what was already in there to for these species. And so what we would do is I would do score again, and I would click on a species this time. And let's see, I think that was the first one. It doesn't really matter because no one is checking me to see if this is absolutely right. But I believe that this species is separated from these other two species by this character, the keeledness of the fronds. So I believe, but it doesn't matter. Let's call it complete. And then, okay, so we're calling it complete. That's how in Elijah's key, if we go back here, oh no, it was that species. So this is the second species. I want to do this at least somewhat right so that it makes some sense. So I haven't done anything, haven't saved it, so I can go back out and I'm gonna click on this one now and hit submit. Okay, now if I go to the guide, here it is. This species is separated from these two species by these two characters, right? So I'm going to go in, and it's fronds with keel separate from, okay. So my interpretation of that character is that incomplete versus complete keel. He words it differently. I'm just showing you head, frond, central keel, and it's either complete, running from midocellus to torular triangle, which bees don't have, incomplete starting at midocellus but not reaching torular. And what did I say it had? It has separate. Okay, so that would be incomplete. And we go back. So it would be incomplete. Then I come to these two characters. So in this particular case, these two characters that are separating these two might also apply to this species, but I have no information about that within this current system. So I would, at that point, go to a specimen and I would look it up. And we'll just pretend that I looked it up to see what it has. And I'm like, okay, so let me back up. I don't have to, I can leave these blank and the guide will still work. But the power is that what if, you didn't understand this character? You could probably still get to the ID by answering these characters or possibly on that. So you want to score as many characters as you can. If it's inappropriate, like, well, let's say on this species that we're scoring here, electrolithron, if we looked at this character, it's like, well, it's presence of hairs, absent or numerous. Well, there's a few scattered hairs. I might interpret it as absent, but I could also see it is visually present. So I'm going to score it for both. Like, you want people to get to the right answer. I have another character up here that will separate it. So I'm going to leave that as scoring for both because it's an ambiguous one. I'm not going to say, well, it's more on the present side. So again, you want a guide to work the best for getting the answer. It's not a taxonomic cladistic table where the answer, right? If it can be interpreted as having hairs present, even though that they're absent because you're looking for only a certain kind of hair or you consider it to be absent, it's not up to you. It's what would someone coming in who has only that specimen thinking about? So in this case, it's like, okay, they could misinterpret this. I have another character or several other characters that are really going to be rock solid for that species. I'm going to score it for both, right? Or I could score it for neither. It doesn't matter. This just means to me later that I have addressed this character. Like, I may have forgotten and go back like, oh, I never scored it for that, and then have to go through everything again. So I'm going to score it for both, even though it does nothing for separating the species, but it shows that I did look at it, decided that it was ambiguous, and that I don't need to look at it again. And I'm being conservative and saying that it has both characters, even though it's largely absent of hairs, but it does have some. So I'm going to score it for both. Then this character, like, oh, it's definitely got, it's fovulate. So I'm going to leave it like that. Now I just hit save. And now I'm going to hit refresh. Here's the code for making these changes, making this scoring. And we're going to hit, refresh. And it's done that. I'm going to go now and do Agamedes, and it has a complete keel, and it has, let's see, this is a legit difference. So presence of hairs, Agamedes, cetos, so it does have hairs, cetos, present, and narrow furrow versus round furrow, fovulate, so round. Okay, that one is going to get saved. There's the code, says everything is cool. We're going to hit refresh. That's now active. And then the last one is this species. And we would say that the head, sorry, I got distracted, is complete. It's a narrow furrow and it is absent. I put in a picture here for illustration that obviously is not the picture that we want. Just want to show you, which I will in a second, how to deal with pictures that would help people with the characters. Okay, now we hit refresh now at this point, we should have a workable guide. So if I hit restart, which is the restart to the guide, why am I seeing, oh, did I hit refresh? Odd. I'm not seeing, why am I not seeing anything here? I did before. What am I doing wrong? Do I have to go to menu, submit? It should restart. And this should have the guide that we have just scored in there. How embarrassing. What am I forgetting? We did refresh. There's the correct things. When we do, let me just check here. So go back to score, go there. There's the score. So you can see the scoring's in green. So everything looks active. So this should start. I did kill a bunch of characters that were in place there when I started the guide. I wonder if that's a problem. These are all there. And restart. Is anything showing up here? Huh. Well, odd. It was working before I got here. Let me try this. Can I copy this? Is that copied? I think so. And dump it over into Chrome.
Sam, you know the implication of this is that you're going to have to host a half-day virtual workshop in March.
Oh, why? I mean, I'm happy to, but
this is more complicated than some people might think.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, yeah, there is a lot.
I was actually going to ask you to do that anyway.
Yeah, so I'm happy to work with. The easiest thing is, if you want to do a guide, is just talk to me. I can set it up with Pick, and then I'll walk you through it, and then and when you have problems, just talk to me. There's not, if you look on the support, there's plenty of there is information about doing all these things, but it's not that easy. It's easier just to work with me, and I'm happy to do it in parallel. Oh, I know why. Okay, so here's controls, this is how you order the character. All right, I'm going to go back to Firefox. So I like Firefox better. So go back to controls. So right now, nothing is here, right? So that means nothing is going to show up on the guide because you haven't told it what shows up and what doesn't. So in this particular baby guide, you would want everything to show up, right? Because you're only separating 3 species. But if you have a guide with 200, 500 species in some cases, you don't want every single little nitpicky character to show up. So the front page is a subset that's really useful for dividing out lots of species. And then we can go back to an active guide to show you this. And then you would use the simplify button on the actual guide once it's set up to recreate a new guide for whatever subset of characters or of species are left in this very complex guide. It creates a new guide, and what happens is that, pretend this is a really big guide, you would have way number of characters. A lot of them are just like this species versus that species kinds of characters. Rather than kludge up the guide with every single one of those, you just show 10. And then you hit simplify. It looks at the species list that's left and brings up the characters that were hidden that are appropriate to the remaining list. So here we go. So now I have said, these are the characters that I want showing, which in this case are all of them. And here's the order I want them shown. And we hit refresh. Okay, now when I start the guide, look, there it is. Thank God. So now we have an active guide. So I'm looking at a set of characters. I have theoretically the correct genus in front of me. And I'm going like, well, let's see. It's got a central keel complete. I could do any character in any order, right? Doesn't really matter. And I can click them on and off. Oh, there's 2 left now. And see the simplify guide, the button shows up now. And I could click simplify and it would just, well, let's do that. I now want a guide that only separates out those 2. And I have 2 characters that help me do that. So here, the turtle and any of these buttons work. Is absent, it's that one. If it was present, it's that species. Oh, why does it show D? That's interesting. What is D? D. How did we get to? I don't know what that is. Resend. All right, that was interesting. We're restarting the guide, clicking the search button. Those are all there. Narrow furrow has a narrow, so we can do these in any order. There's that species is the only one with the narrow furrow. I can go up here to complete, and I still have 2. I'm still trying to replicate that problem. I've simplified. Now I have 2 remaining ones again. I'm going to say that character is present. I don't know what's going on. I've never seen that happen before. Let me click it off. Click it again. Yeah, not sure why that one shows up. When I do that, oh, it shows up both times. What if I do that one? Huh. That shows up. And that shows up. Maybe there's something about this particular species that, get rid of that one. Because there they are both together. I do it alone. I can replicate that. I have no idea what's going on there. Let's pretend that didn't happen. So I'm sure there's some answer that I'm not sure what's going on right now, why that is, but we have, and I can click restart to get the guide going again. I can click menu, and that gets me back to working on this. If I want a picture, like here, this picture here shows up to represent absent, no hairs present, which this clearly does not, but we can add pictures pretty easily and go back to menu and go to image tools. And I'm going to go to my directory of pictures. And I'm going to start just with the first page. I've got like 30,000 pictures in there. And I'm going to use Agapostum splendens. And I'm going to want to add a circle around some feature in there. So it gives me you can see here, here's a series of basic photography tools that I can use to modify a picture. I click submit, and I've got the original picture up here, and I've got my modified picture. So first of all, these modifications, a square crop, and sharpening one time. It's a little more bright, a little more saturated in there. And then I can do the circle. Let's say I want to look at this expanded femur, and it adds a circle around it. And then I can say, okay, I want that associated with the Franz character, which of course it is not really. I'm going to hit save, and it's showing me what's been done in terms of setting this up. If I like what I see, I'm going to hit confirm. And I have another page I can turn pictures on and off in these pages associated with the two characters if I wanted to. Usually don't. I could do it all by code. I could just put in this information and add in the JPEG file name. I rarely do that either. I mostly go through this process over here. And then I hit save. Yet again, there's my code. It says, yes, everything is good. I hit refresh. And now when I hit restart, a second picture, yeah, shows up there. And so you can add as many pictures as you want. If I wanted more than one picture here, not a problem. It adds them in. You can modify them either in prior, like in Photoshop, and add arrows or words or whatever you want, or add the, in a very limited way, you can make those modifications using the tools in there. And then if you want to eliminate them, you can reverse that operation too. I'm going to hit menu to get everything back. Sometimes if you have, let's say you have a really big guide, there's a couple features that are really useful. So this score if you click on that, what you get, you have characters over here and sort of actions over here with species. So I could dump in a species name, or if I had done this, let's say, well, I'm going to show you what happens. So now you see the two species name there. I could say, if it's these two species, this state is considered to be complete. And I could do this, say if it's anything other than these two species, it's incomplete. Doesn't make any sense here, but when you're dealing with huge lists and you add a new character and you have to score 300 specimens, then something like this, score if, allows you to click through all the ones that have a character without going in individually to each species page and making, adding it or not. You can do it in bulk. You can also, let's say this species name changed. It allows you to do that. So here is the old name, and I could change it to a new name. I think we've talked about drop if just drops an entire character. Like I don't want this character. I don't want the state of this character. It allows you to get rid of it. That would be the basics. So questions, like I said, if you're interested in a guide, the best thing to do, just get in touch with me. We'll set up a blank guide and we'll go from there. And I'll just be on the phone with you.
Sam, could you briefly mention the resolve option, which is really useful when you have a whole bunch of...
Yes, yeah. So right now, if you're building a new guide, then what happens is you add a bunch of characters that you think are useful, you score everything, and you score conservatively, so a lot of things are overlapped, but you're like, are there any hanging groups? In other words, that won't resolve if I use the guide because it's just too complicated. And so you can click resolve here and it will show nothing because this is a completely resolved guide. But let's do an example here. Let's score this one again, but we're going to score it as having everything, which of course then will not resolve with the others. But you can imagine this being the case in some future thing. I wonder if it didn't like that weird diacritical thing there. Anyway, so now if we hit resolve, it shows that these two species could not be resolved. And by resolved, it means that there's not one path through the guide that would uniquely separate those two. And it also is not separated from this species. Well, so it shows it the same way, it shows this species doesn't separate from this, and that same species doesn't separate it from that one. It's just, it's a mirror. So you could, but that's a good point too, because sometimes, so if you did this, let's say this is a huge guide, these two didn't resolve. Why didn't it resolve? Probably because they're really very similar species. And with bees, a lot of times the differences are really subtle. It's not like one has red legs and one has black legs. It's like, when I look at them, I can tell them apart, but I don't have any really super clear things. So in the other guides, what we would do is we would have Agamates versus Electrolithron, and then we would present that as a character, this versus that. This species has these 5 things, and this species has these 5 things, but we would include a lot of things like occurs primarily on the coastal plain areas, or is associated with sand, or is early spring versus late spring, things that you wouldn't want to have in a guide because it's qualitative, slightly bigger than, those kinds of things, so that you have multiple pieces of information to put together a weight of evidence on some of these subtle things. Because a lot of it's like, it's hairier, but how do you quantify hairier? You could come up with some way of doing that, but a lot of times it's like, I'm not sure exactly what you mean by your little measure of hairiness. But if you give me 5 or 6 other things, then I can also look at that. So this is where we get into ambiguous kinds of characters. So you would never want to put a character being amount of hair, hairy, not hairy, right? That's not very useful. But when you look at them, 2 specimens, 2 different species, a lot of times it's like, well, that's always hairier, but it's in comparison. So we'll mention that in a character between 2 tricky to tell apart things, rather than depending on a character that, and are states of a character that are difficult to divine if you only have, the key is I only have 1 specimen, right? I don't have a collection where I have both and I go like, oh yeah, this is clearly the hairier one as I compare it to my reference set. So a lot of times you're confronted by that, and someone who's just using the guide for the first time, you want to give them a lot of information that is comparative and a set of characters that hopefully will help them separate out a tricky to tell apart pair. And any other questions? That was a good one.
Yeah, Dave Pecor here. I just had a quick question. First off, Sam, thank you for the demo. This was really great. I think
good.
We're going to give it a shot. We'll probably, poke you for lots of other questions. But one thing I was wondering, and maybe I missed it, is there a way to add geography as a couplet?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you can
so we do that.
By state or...
So we can do that actually. So if we go to score all states and things, and this is a good one because I think for this species, so we go to, get this out of the way, new characters again. We do it by states and provinces, but you can do it for whatever you want. So it's like in this case, geographic location, and it could be any wording you want. In these, I noticed that one was from Asia and the other 2 were from Africa, but as is many parasitic species, there's not a lot of records, so you can't get more specific than that because a lot of countries haven't had enough work to know whether they're there or not. So you can set up a character like this very easily, and then when you do your scoring, oops, I didn't do that right. Do your scoring, you would have, oh, that's Asia, right? So this could be states, it could be parks. So we talked about this before. If you wanted, like in the bees, you wanted, I just want to create a guide for bees in, you know, that live in blah, blah, blah park. You can set up a character that is, you know, lists of bees in parks that you are interested. It doesn't matter that you're interested in. But I'll note one thing. So when we do the bee ones, we tell people these are not known localities. These are localities that we believe that the species may be present. So because there's a difference, because we have incomplete lists of species occurrences in bees, and this is probably true of almost all insects, we look at the currently known records and then we buffer it out. Like we do the states in this case and provinces on the edge of the record list. And if there's any internal states, like if we had West Virginia, Maryland, and North Carolina, we're going to score it for being in Virginia too. So you can have you could have two characters. One is I forget what our wording is, but let's call it probably occurs in these states or could possibly occur in these states, geographic locations and known localities of the species. So you could use either. Remember, as you're going along, you can click things on and click things off. That's useful to the power user, but you'd have to be really careful for the new user because they would like, well, I want known locations, right? But it's a guide, right? So if you're in Virginia, but the surrounding states have it, then likely you have that species in that state too. See what I'm saying? So yeah. Very easy to add whatever breakdowns you want. You know, you could break down to counties. It's world's your oyster.
Awesome.
Mosquito regions.
Yeah.
You could also, we also add date information. So in the bee guides, it's months. So, because we get a lot of bees that are only out in the spring and others in the fall. Yeah. We do the same sort of thing where we will say, okay, well, the records are almost all April and May, but we'll do March, April, May, June to, again, be conservative. And that for sure eliminates things that are in September, though. And then the same thing is true with measurements. Like we have in a lot of the guides, we have millimeters for size. So we have every millimeter, 1 through, you know, whatever, 15 millimeters for the set of species there. And we'll go to the literature and it'll say, you know, 10 to 12 millimeters, but we'll do 9 to 13 to be safe because, for example, particularly with measuring lengths, it's darn tricky because, well, you know, things crumple up, it's bent, the head's bent or the head's straight out, the abdomen's extended, the abdomen's retracted. How do you figure all that out? You don't. You just have a big broad range. But those kinds of characters, for example, are really useful, but only at the extremes. Like this is a really tiny, tiny bee, or this is a huge bee. And then a lot of things are just not super separable in the middle, which is fine. Again, you want to be conservative and think about the person who doesn't know anything or is just using it for the first time or as a beginner and doesn't have all that internal referencing that you have. Experts a lot of times are the worst builders of guides because for them the guides is like just little notes to themselves, like oh yeah, that's the one, the big one. And and so they write these guides and they're like, what do you mean it doesn't work? It works great. Well, it works great for them because they already have an entire catalog and pictures and distributions and things in their mind. And the hardest thing is, and particularly how people write, is to get them to, okay, we need to do this again, and we need to expand this. This wording is completely ambiguous. I have no idea what you're talking about, so no one else is going to know that. I can tell you every single person and this is, I'm just going to say, is useful to have me on, because someone else will just complain to just go. I don't even look at so the first step is send me your characters, and we just work on the characters, and I don't even have to know what they are, just to do the work out the wording before we do any building. And then yeah, so you want to be conservative in that. And like I mentioned before, more information is better than less information. So and then the final step is always the hardest one, which is, all right, this looks pretty good. Here, you try it, this person who has not been involved. And it could be, first would be your colleagues. And if they get things wrong, that's a problem, right? Particularly if you give them good specimens. So if they're not getting it right, then got to rethink it. They got to score more broadly, got to change the wording, more pictures, something, right? Because our objective is not to do a guide that we like, but to do a guide useful for other people.
Regarding the distribution maps, Sam, you might want to mention that the species pages can have a distribution map if data is submitted.
Right. Yep. So I don't know if PIC sets that up or it's automatic, but on a let's open up some bee guides here. Or we can flip over to here. So here's my Andrina guide, 500 some species in there. If I click on a species, here's a species page. I'm going to turn this down a little bit. Oh, no, I can see it here. So here's a species page. And again, it's not showing the synonyms for some reason up here, but here's a distribution map, super weak on this rare species apparently. There's the literature that we've pulled out. And so this map is automatically generated. Let's go to Accepta, which has more information in it. I've got pictures that I've dumped up. I've got all the records that are being floated by DiscoverLife. I pull out figures from the literature too. And then at the bottom, PIC has it set up that if there's associations in any of these databases with hosts, they show up there. But if you, in particular, the mapping is really a key feature, particularly when you're dealing with multiple species. You can go like, you know, I'm located here. There are no records of that species nearby. I could be that Accepta is there, or it could be more likely that I'm wrong. You know, so these maps become, particularly for a well-populated one. So DiscoverLife, it's actually very easy to import to DiscoverLife any map of species that you want. So if, like for the mosquito folks, I imagine you guys also maintain databases of your records in your in the state. I'm just pretending that there's tons of mosquito records with latitude and longitudes. You can dump those all in. He could take monster big files, and if you look at this, what happens is these reference a specific database. In this case, Nancy Adamson's database. These are her fields. Fields don't matter. All it needs is a legitimate name and a legitimate latitude and longitude and lots of different kinds of formats. And then it will map it. You include whatever additional fields you want, or exclude if you want to hide people's names or something. But it will be useful, and also shows, once you get used to looking at the at these maps, you know what data are available. It's really clear very quickly what's a rare species and what's not, and adding to that weight of evidence for whether you have that species here or not, or oh, there's very few records there, so I'm going to weigh that in too. So it comes with, I mean, it's relatively straightforward Excel spreadsheet kind of stuff, or text files, even better, to add piles of species records.
So that's very helpful. Thank you. Yeah, we do a ton of distribution data for sure.
Yeah, yep. And that would go up once the file is set up, and if it's working, meaning there's not some weird thing in the middle of it, it'll be up the next day. And it's a very fast database. You can see that it refreshes and is mapping tons of data very quickly. So that can be useful. And then it's also not a grabbable database. I mean, if you're clever, you can decompose these records back out, but there's no place where you can download all the records. You also, like, I want to replace. So what I do is I'm constantly replacing my database of records, sometimes every day, more often several times a month, with a new database. It has my latest data entries and my latest corrections. And then if for whatever reason you or I don't want our data to show anymore, I go in and I delete the file. Yeah, it's about mapping, nothing else. It's not about, a GBiffy kind of thing or Bison or these others where people can download your data and whatnot. It's just to show things on a map.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And you put in here, the information you want in terms of like ownership and how how you would get back to that person if you're interested in more data.
Great.
Hey, Sam, one thing that I mean, it's more like kind of a general thought. I was wondering what you were thinking of that. So I find it a little bit unfortunate that, if someone, writes a key and then, like another researcher for a paper uses that key, that the citation basically goes to DiscoverLife, which is Asher and Pickering, right?
Oh, actually, it doesn't. No, the checklist does. So Asher and Pickering do the checklist, but and I didn't mention this because it's not a big thing, but here you click on credits. There's the guide credits.
Okay.
So you can in the credits for the guide, you put whatever you want. You can write on and on and on like we did here and write our references, or you can just say this guide should be cited as blah 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 blah.
Okay.
And then that's the citation.
I see.
John and has been very active in making sure that he gets credit for his work on creating the species lists.
Yeah.
But those aren't guides, but that becomes for a lot of people the de facto reference, because I don't care really. And a lot of my credit things are out of date and not very active, but whoever's doing the key can modify this absolutely however you want. And it would be good for just what you're talking about to write in a citation standard.
Yeah. I think it would be good to, basically have those keys basically with like a DOI, that every key has like a unique, digital identifier that could then, be part, say, of, I don't know, that you would find on, say, Google Scholar or something like that.
That's an interesting thought. So Pick would be the person to talk to about that.
Yeah.
I don't know, because I don't know anything about DOI numbers. And is it something that anyone can do? Like, could you say, I want my guide to have DOI number, blah, blah, blah?
Well, I think technically that would not be a big problem.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not like a developer, so I can't provide you with any specifics, but I don't see a reason why this should not be possible.
Yeah.
I think it would be nice because I feel like it's a little bit competing, that you have like journal articles, which are like a very clear citable reference, but you can't update them. Whereas you have the matrix keys, which have a lot of advantages, but people are still always a little bit hesitant to citing a website that is not, basically not a hard reference like a paper.
Right.
So I think it would actually be, I think it would make would it make it more attractive to develop keys for taxonomists who kind of rely on these metrics? Because no one is citing the Andrina key, for example. You know, it's a huge key. I mean, you know, it's like hours and hours of work. And, you know, no one, I mean, a lot of people use it, but no one actually cites it. And it's like a little bit of a vacuum there.
Well, so there's an interesting journal that is run out of Oregon State. And it's the, he's on this list, I think. Chris, what's his name? Someone know him? He's at the museum.
Marshall's?
Yeah. Yeah. And he has just started a journal that basically is for these kinds of ambiguous things. So what you could do is create a guide, then go and do an article or a paper, a published journal article that describes the guide and talks about your innovations and, you know, and has the link back. So you would have both that more, you know, direct journal reference at the end, and you have a citable guide, although, like you pointed out, it's ambiguous and not used very often in sort of a gray area in terms of its publication. So you could have, for example, in the creation of that article, have the guide reviewed. Like no one, I have people send in suggestions all the time, but I don't write the guides that I'm doing. I'm not writing them and saying, now I need a official review.
Yeah.
And that's usually part of any kind of publication string. But one could do that, I think, and then the Brazilians have another thing called Journal of Checklists or something.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? So I would embed it. So I'm just throwing out the idea that you could embed a reference for the guide creator in a publication, get it reviewed also at the same time.
Yeah, which would not be bad either. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, just an idea, or it's something I have been thinking about.
I don't see any reason that anyone can do almost anything they want. So yeah, so there's nothing coming from Pick or myself, and you know, we're just helpers.
Yeah.
That you know, I'm sure there's some crazy things that would get shut down, but mostly you can kind of run it how you want it. But more reviews would be good, because a lot of times, you know, we just develop this ourselves and we're like, this looks great. You know, we really could use some hard looks, which we of course don't want, because that might mean we have to make some changes. So, I don't see any restrictions. I just think there has to be some, you know, figure out the exact avenue.
Are there any other questions? Well, this went almost an hour and a half. And this is our third installment. So, but I think, and then I'm going to post this on the same website that I posted the other ones on our SCAN website. And I'll send out the link to everybody. And then, yeah, I think it would be great if people take you up individually, Sam.
That's really what it needs to go that way, because I don't know. It just cuts out a lot of problems that are easy to solve. It's not that I'd like to do it.
Yeah, and I'm happy to support, you know, identification of anything. Obviously, my short-term interest was to try to get people to extend the B guides farther to the west. And I think there's just lots and lots of opportunities to create regional or specific B guides out west. So I hope people do take up on that. I'm really hoping to have our group start one for the 350 species that we have on the San Francisco peaks here in northern Arizona.
Well, that would be great. And we actually have a bunch of efforts going on right now that are leading to expansion of the Discover Life Guides further to the west, including right now we're in negotiations with the Smithsonian about bringing the national collection out here. And we have a Fish and Wildlife Service employee who actually knows how to ID bees that will be joining our group, and we hope it elevates from there. The problem, of course,
you mean
is
like the Smithsonian bees will go temporarily out to your place?
Yeah, we're going to get them on loan to curate them, and then we'll be using them for guide development because, you know, we have this synoptic collection of the eastern stuff, but as everything, once you hit the upper Great Plains, like it just total different groups, which we don't have in our collections.
Right. And then I'm assuming, and I think you talked about this last time, that, you know, once somebody starts working on a group, then it potentially makes it easier for people doing their own keys. So for example, our Andrina that would occur in northern Arizona, we could potentially benefit from what you've already done with your larger Andrina list.
Yeah. Yeah, so you can have a character in our geographic set that says northern Arizona, and you just have to score it for the species that you want.
Yeah. Yep. No, that sounds great. Okay, well, are there any other questions? Okay, well then I will stop recording and end the meeting, and hopefully we'll have a number of ID guide initiatives starting
That would
up
be great. Yeah.
over the winter and early spring.
Right, nothing to do out there in COVID land, so.
All right, this is a great time to start to create ID guides. So,
all right, well,
okay.
Thanks for inviting me, Neil.
Okay, sure. Thanks a lot, Sam. And with that, I will end the meeting. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.